Alright, welcome back to the channel. We have a knife, and I think this is one that I have been wanting to put my hands on. Very much reminiscent of some of the things that I've had in the past. That's interesting. Looks like the box got thrown away for this one, which this is a private sale, so we'll see if I did well or not here. But this has been reminding me a lot of one of my favorite knives, the Demco AD20.5. This particular knife was upgraded with skiff bearings, and it is the Vision R. For those of you that follow a lot of knives, you probably are familiar with this and what's kind of exciting about it, what's related of this knife to the Demco family, or or how it's similar, at least, if you want to put it that way. It's just coming out of the mailbox, so it's super cold. I think it may be a collaboration, the Snecx or something. Yeah, actually, I didn't even look that up. I've just wow, really light on the detent. It feels like it's fine, but it's really light. Like, I did not expect that to just open up that easily. But that probably means you can wheel it out really easily. So that's cool. You'll see again, it's like fresh out of the mailbox, 30-something degrees out right now. So got a little bit of condensation going on, but immediate first impression is really nice finish on the blade. It's not necessarily like my finish of choice. It's what, bead blasted or something? I gotta look at what it is. I didn't just got home from a work trip, so I haven't really done much research on this one, but that's what I was really curious about. And I've heard that this can come out like that, which that's hard for me to believe that they did that. But it did take some effort. So although I have heard that that's a little bit of a thing, that was not like easy for me to pull. Like, you'd really have to give it a good tug for it to come out of there. So yeah, I mean, it works. And it's not as easy. The thing I'll say about the Shark Lock is it's got some jimping on it, which feels sorely missing here. So the overall, the function and the feel of it's good. It's actually very similar in a lot of ways, like sort of surprisingly similar in the feel. But man, it's hard to get a purchase on it. It feels like you're not 100% confident. Like, you're pretty sure it's gonna work, but not this sure. This is like really good how they get the jimping on here. So that'd be like my first criticism. Now, $279. This compares really closely to the $315 3V version of the Demco in titanium. This would be like a really close price and comparison. So, even the blade shape with the shark's foot on the Demco and the call it a sheep's foot, a little pointier, like a little maybe more multifunctional here, but a little less of like an intuitive, like it kind of curves up at the end, so it's not going to be quite as easy to get that down into something. It'll work fine, but if I look at holding it from here to there, the sort of distance, if I'm going to go try and cut something, I want it to be about right here. So the blade length is a bit longer. You have a really big forward choil here. It chokes up nicely. I mean, the thing overall feels good. It's, I think, a little maybe a similar weight. The pocket clip's really weird. I wonder if that works well. That's weird to me that the pocket clip is interacting with this to some degree. Yeah, that's really weird to me that would be like almost, it's not interacting, but it kind of is. That's very odd to me. That it doesn't feel like anything could go wrong there, but let's see if that's actually something. The pocket clip folds your pants a little because of the way it sits in your pocket, but it's not bad actually. I like how it's kind of small and minimalist. That's probably the weirdest part of the knife, but it's also kind of cool. I mean, this whole knife is obviously feels very concept car-ish. Awesome on the opening. Kind of wish it had a thumb stud, but at the same time, I see sort of the appeal of this. So it also reminds me a lot of the Devo Stout. Very close in competition. You can see a really common set of theme here. Much longer blade than the other two. That's super interesting how long they went on that blade. And then, you know, I don't know if you want to call it milling, but they're essentially, they haven't milled it out, but they've almost created like a grip in there. You can almost get like your 3 fingers in there. It's kind of cool. I don't think it's quite intended to be that way, but it sort of works that way. Maybe it is intended to be that way. I don't know. It is like a quieter. So yeah, that was interesting. I was curious if you could, because the detent's so light, you can actually whip this super hard and it'll just come all the way out. I can't do it on the screen here. I don't have enough room. Can I? Let me see. Maybe I'll try and break something. No, I can't quite do it here without cutting up stuff that's surrounding here. But this one also has skiff in it, so I wonder, I'm not actually seeing the original format. Let's see. Yeah, I put it back together well. It's super strong on the lockup. Let's take a look inside, see what we see. So it even has additional milling inside there. I was not expecting that. So it's really milled out for weight reduction. I have all my light on. See how much I can give you a good view of that. So it's hyper milled because you've got the holes plus the milling. Okay, let's see what the weight is on this thing. I'm sure I have watched a couple reviews on this, but it's been a while. I was always just kind of like, I got to get my hands on one of those that sort of fits in this family here of knives I really like for EDC, but on the Blade Runner 2049 or whatever the year is for that movie, end of things. So I believe this is 4.2 ounces, 4.32 ounces here. The Devo Stout, 4 flat. And the Snecx Vision R, 3.62. So it's definitely lighter, even though it has quite a bit longer blade. Now, is it kind of curious if it's more usable blade because that coil is really long there. Let's take a look as my background slides off of the screen. So let's see how the actual like cutting length is. It's definitely more. You got about a 10 or 15%, probably a 15% there increase in cutting length. And how about versus this guy? This guy's a little longer, maybe a 5 or 10% increase in cutting length. I don't think you can actually see that on the camera right now. Let me try and get those lined up again. So you got like a very small increase in cutting length against the Devo Stout and a pretty considerable increase in cutting length against the Demco there. The Demco, you get much more positive feedback. That's something we talk about in the firearms, you know, basically in trigger resets. There's feedback that you feel when you're using a trigger on a pistol or really any firearm, but particularly relevant for pistols with repeat fire. And as you pull your trigger, gun goes off, recoil, and then as you let it back out in the reset, you'll feel a click, and that means you can shoot again. You don't have to let your finger all the way back out. That reset will give you some feedback. I can't remember if there's a separate term for that in firearms, but that feedback tells you you can shoot again. And for instance, Glock is known for having a very nice reset. If you're not using the full length of the trigger, you can actually really very intuitively, not intuitively, I don't know if that's the right term, but you can learn where that reset point is and be much more efficient with your trigger. And in firearms, the less you move your finger and the more directly you pull back versus like pushing forward or pulling this way, the straighter you can pull your finger back, the more accurate you're gonna shoot, because the gun will actually go where you're aiming instead of being pushed or pulled one way or the other. And one of the things that I noticed on this Vision R versus the Demco is you get much less feedback. It's very smooth because of that. So it feels very nice, and but it feels more, how can I put it, Chinese. The Demco is clickier. It is more almost violent. I don't know if that's the right term, but like there's a lot more feedback and there's a lot more sound. It's a lot more, I'm trying to think of the right term for it. Noisier. It's more reassuring for the user, but it's probably a little scarier for someone around you. And I'll say the same for the Devo Stout. These two have very high feedback sound and feel when you're deploying them. And I'll go with that over the elegance or the smoothness of this one most of the time. I think there's a place for smoothness in knives, but for like a functionality, if I'm doing something with this hand and I'm trying to pull my knife out one-handed over here and I can't see it, you know if my knife's in or out. In, out, in, out. And that feedback or that, you know, I don't know what the right term for that sound is, just kind of gives you that confidence. Whereas here, I'm not 100% sure if the knife deployed or not because there's not as much feedback. And it doesn't swing quite as consistently. I'm sure I would learn it. The other thing is it's not only is that it doesn't have jimping here, it's also thinner. So I'm feeling it more on my finger because you have about 20 to 30% less width here. Maybe it's about 20%, or you can see it's not a huge difference. Maybe I can put them up side by side. Yeah, no, it's probably 25% less, and it's enough to actually feel it. Now you get a lighter knife, maybe a thinner one. No, it's not thinner, but it may be a thinner blade stock because of that. So it's a little slicier, a little thinner behind the edge, perhaps, than the Demco. Albeit only slightly, I think, based on what I'm seeing. In fact, I think the blade stock thickness is fairly similar. But this is it's a really cool knife. I feel like if the Demco didn't exist, this would be at the forefront. Now, would they have even come up with this idea if the Demco didn't exist? Probably not. I am going to guess based on the timing that came out and the hotness of the Demco since they came out, and I think it was 2020, mid or early 2020, you started seeing the first Shark Lock 8020s hitting the market in, you know, either I think it was a G10 first maybe, but like the full size Demco 8020 was hitting the market. And, you know, timing wise and whatnot, I'd say that this probably makes sense that was inspired, if not, you know, completely learned from this knife. But I don't know what the history is. I got to do some research. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here, which is oftentimes what I'm doing here. I get back from a work trip, literally got off the plane about 45 minutes, an hour ago, got home, and this was sitting in the mailbox, and it was actually one of the first two knives I bought on Reddit. So I really wanted to get it open and figure out if I got hoodwinked or if I had done okay on the purchase, and I feel like I did okay. So that's how unprepared I am for this. Now, I don't think they put blade steel on here, and I'm trying to remember what this is. I feel like it's like maybe an S. Let me see. Sometimes manufacturers will hide it. and you can kind of see it when you're deploying the knife. Oh, look at that, there's something in there. See if I can get some light on the subject here. Indeedy. Let me grab a flashlight. Maybe I can actually make it so you can see it. I don't know if this is going to make things worse or better. Having some definite trouble here. There we go. CPM 20V. So one of the best blade steels you can get. So I'd say that's an advantage over the Demco. That's a better blade steel than Demco has been putting in there. Whoops. AD20.5. They definitely, you know, went with the Demco Special 3V for, it's a more expensive knife and a worse blade steel. You know, all around worse. I think there's a place like a hard use I don't know, outdoor or something, 3V, maybe the toughness of it's better for some areas. You live in Tennessee or something and you don't have, you know, corrosion issues. This might be a really good blade steel for you. It's definitely a very good blade steel, but, you know, arguably all around corrosion, toughness, edge retention, and hardness. CPM 20V, you know, that's the top of the top right now, aside from like Magna Cut for an all-around blade steel. So that's same thing as M390 or 204P. You know, that's the shit. So definitely, like, you call it pound for pound, lighter, longer, you know, probably made in China. Just have to assume because it's from Wii, but again, see how much research I did ahead of this video. But the initial impression, really nice knife, technical, and it feels like it's sort of borderline between being a cheap knife and a really expensive knife. And the technology is there, the fit and finish is good, but that overall, I've seen it written on a couple forums, the sole of the knife is very technical feeling. It doesn't have that, you know, that Demco sole. There's something, even this one made in Taiwan, but even more so with, even more so with, you know, their machine ground and hand ground US made versions like this one. Someone watched Rambo growing up when they made this knife, and you feel it when you grab it. You feel that there's a passion for putting out a really good product and for the weight and the, the feel of it that you just don't get with this knife. Even with this knife, Devo Stout, and I really find this to be one of my favorite all-around knives. I put it as like kind of my number 2 knife for the year. Right now, I'm like, my top 3 knives for 2022 are basically all sitting here. It's these 3. You got a Pyrite for $50 on, you know, they mark them down to $50. The Demco ranging from $150, the AD20.5 ranging from $150 to, if you want to go crazy, $1,000 for the Damascus version for the AD20.5. But, you know, call the 8020, 8020S or whatever. I'm calling out the 8020.5 because that's the one that came out this year. And then the Devo Stout. These are my 3 best all-around knives for what you're paying. And here's the thing about this knife versus this knife. Arguably, there's some things I like more about this knife than this one. The button lock feels a little cheaper. The action feels a little cheaper, but it works really well, and it's not much. Sorry, it's been a while since I manipulated this one. And it's not much different feeling than this for $50 versus $279 or $69. They mark these to like $269 and call it on sale on the websites, right? The MSRP is a little more. Like, this is a better value knife to me than this. Now that's a better blade steel. This is arguably, for me, I like this kind of locking system a little more. But I'll use the thumb stud for, let me see what kind of, you can definitely deploy this by thumb. I literally just got this out of box. Let me see if I can do it. It's not bad. You can definitely deploy this one because it's got a bigger place for you to put your finger in there. So that one's got a really nice way to deploy by thumb. Like, so I don't mind that one being a slot only as much as this is just a little. And the weird thing is, like, there's plenty of room here for them to go a little bigger, right? They could have made that slot bigger in either direction, bump that up, and do kind of one of these things. The whole concept here of the Devo Stout is you come over the top and you kind of get a spot that your hand sits into here. Sorry, dropping stuff over here. Your finger fits in there or your thumb fits in there, and you could have done a very similar thing here. That's part of why it just feels very like straight edgy and kind of weird. Like the overall feel, like I'm sure you can actually do it. You know, there's something funny about the feeling of this knife. It feels like it's not gonna, I don't know how strong this model is. I'd have to like take this knife apart and see what they're actually doing in here, versus on like a Demco where the Shark lock is, you know, arguably the strongest lock in the market along with the Triad. I don't know what exactly they are doing in here, if that's kind of on the level of like an Axis lock or something like that. I don't know what the mechanism is, but it, like this one reminds me, you're just not as confident that the lock's going to do its job. This one's fine. You know, a button lock is pretty damn reliable, I think. Probably very similar to like a frame lock in terms of you're going to have like a partial overlap of the locking of the lock bar, whereas Shark lock, you're putting a complete like overlap of the lock bar. You just have a massive piece of metal sitting in front of the blade where you just never feel like there's a way you could possibly, you know, using human hands, unlock that knife by mistake. This one does not give you that confidence. So I feel like I'm being very critical of this knife because there's a lot I like about it. But, you know, I'm putting it against the very best knives I feel like that I have and comparing it to that. Now, if I start comparing it to things like the Bugout, let's do it both on size. Now we're getting into this is, you know, a pretty tight battle in terms of these just went up from, you know, generally going for 144 to 162, which is getting really expensive for an S30V blade. And, you know, about 162 bucks. I believe this is a full titanium. Let me just double check. That's a full titanium handle, right? It's not even stainless. This is stainless back here. I kind of wish they had done that in titanium pocket clip. That's surprising. Titanium handle, steel on the lock, titanium on the pocket clip, versus, you know, a Grivery handle here. If I compare it to a $300 Tactile Knife Co., like you start getting into these, and that's where this starts feeling like it's going to shine, where I feel like as an all-around knife, everything it needs to do, it starts to be a really strong competitor against those kinds of knives and those kinds of prices. 300 bucks, 162 bucks with plastic handle. Now you got tie handle, 20 CV blade steel. What else do we compare it to? I feel like the Hogue Deck is actually a really good value knife at currently selling for 127. I'm just thinking these things are going to go up at some point, but you got Magna Cut, like that. A much better handle on this than on this one, but this is to me a slightly better value knife. Spyderco. These are actually somewhat reminiscent to each other, where there's a lot of function in them and just kind of weird looking. That's sort of how I think of Spydercos, is they don't like go cosmetics first, they go function first and feel first and stuff. And I'd say that's very similar. These go for what, 161 versus 269. So, you know, you put titanium handles on this, now you got a very similar price for a smaller knife. And, you know, I do like this probably deployment. They need to knock it down more in there like they did here. So this is nicely knocked down here. The top of the blade's nicely knocked down. Looks like, what is that? Is that a flat grind? Or is that a hollow grind? I think it's a flat grind. The Spyderco is obviously like a very long flat grind from top to bottom, super slicey. What else can I compare to? You start pulling out like a $425 Hinderer, and that starts looking like a very good value, although not nearly as robust and strong and American feeling. Yeah, I don't know. Those are like some of the main ones that I think of. You could pull out the, very same company, We Banter, $108. I feel like the We Banter with S35VN, nice strong G10 handle. This is probably a little better value knife for less than half the price, but like, that knife's more elegant and compelling in a lot of ways. So I'm trying to think of anything else I want to, but yeah, so I'm just making the point, like, you don't just jump to the very best of the best knives. Not everyone has these knives. Not everyone's going to be comparing, this Snecx Vision R to these knives. I went right to those because that's the one that I feel like it's set out to compete with. But that's kind of what, I think that does speak to what this knife is about. Like, I'm pulling out some of my favorite, best knives I have here, and those are the ones I think it competes with. So yeah, I definitely put this in like a top echelon. I'll do a pocket score on this one. I feel like I should probably carry it a bit first and just see what it's like carrying it, especially with that kind of funky pocket clip. I'd give that like a 7 out of 10 because it went over the pocket easily, but then it kind of, you put it in over your pocket material and then it folds your pocket material a little bit. But it is like actually a really good shape and strength. Like, it's strong enough, but not too crazy. Like, you can definitely get it over your pocket material. This, that is cool. I didn't know that. I don't know if anyone's, I never saw mention of this. So that kind of helps answer some of the question of what the heck's going on with this lock. That, I gotta give that's some cool style points there. And you kind of see everything that's going on. The blade comes out. That gets some cool style points with me. Huh. And then is that sliding up into this lock bar? I gotta take this one apart and see what exactly is going on. So that goes back and then down in. I put my actual eyes on it. And then yeah, so it's saying, so then this is going behind that lock bar there. And then this is sandwiching that into that lock bar. So that's probably a pretty damn strong mechanism. I'd be curious. I'm going to go do a little research on that one and see. And I got to give a lot of points. Now, I don't know how there's some chance of interference here or this getting dirty because it's exposed or, potentially like being dangerous for some reason. But dude, for style points, I wish I'd caught that earlier in the video because, 28 minutes in, if you stayed to the end, you're going to really appreciate that. That's really cool. I must not have stayed to the end of the review I watched on it because I don't remember seeing anything about that. That is neat. That's one of the cooler things I've seen in a knife. I really appreciate that. And so that is how the detent works, is that does push this back. And this must have like a spring in it somewhere. I don't know where it sits. Must be back in here somewhere. There it is. There is the spring. Okay, that's a pretty cool design. I don't know why they didn't figure out some way, or how they didn't figure out some way to make it so that that can't pop out of there though. I feel like maybe they could have, I feel like maybe there was a way of, you see this, there's a second bar right there. If they could have made it so that you have to have the knife apart for this to slide out, like if they had made it so that this actually has a bottom to it and it rides on this second bar right here so that this can't pop out, I think that would have solidified this to me as one of the coolest like, again, I've heard, I think it was Metal Complex, I'm almost positive. I saw in his review that he said, like, in the first few times he pulled it out a few times because of the shark lock, it encourages you to pull it back and out like that. But then after he got used to it, he only had it happen like one in every like couple hundred times or something like that. I don't see it like it's not happening to me intuitively, because I actually naturally don't want to pull out anyways. I want to pull back and down, and so it works well. But yeah, if they had made it so that you have to take the knife apart for that to pop out backwards, I think that would have made that a really, really great design. I'm assuming they couldn't because of just trying to fit the blade in there when it's folded. But even if you just had to make the whole thing a little taller to do that, I think that's worthwhile to make it so that that could never come out of there, personally. And I think this knife would feel good still, even if it was a bit taller, because it's, you can see kind of the extra distance here. I guess it's pretty similar. It's probably about the right height, I guess, especially if you have put that in there. I don't know. I mean, the other cool thing is when you're gripping this down, you're pushing that lock further into where it needs to go, so that's cool. So the harder you're grabbing it, the more you're securing the lock into place. That's cool. I really like that. I'm not sure that I like that for like from a function perspective, but I like it from a fashion perspective. Well, that's neat. All right, I need to stop talking about it. I'm gonna put a score out on this one. It's gonna be pretty good. Now that I've really dug into it a little more throughout the review, and I should probably carry this one a little bit and put it to the test. See if this one was used. It was advertised as brand new, and I think it is. Looks good. Cool. First knife from Reddit. So that's on Knife Swap. So Reddit group Knife Swap. Check it out. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate you staying to the end if you did. And please like, subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.